Teachers, what clicked about a pupil after meeting their parents? I work at a psychiatric hospital for children and teens where I interact directly with the kids, so I don't often meet their parents. We once had a very sweet little girl in my unit who was admitted for allegedly harming her sister. However, the story didn't add up. I'm good at reading kids, and those who are dangerous to their families usually exhibit certain behaviors. And this girl was different. She was meek, respectful, and the easiest patient I've ever had. During visitation, her parents came and things became clearer. They were constantly berating her for everything. Her mother would tell her she was messed up and asked why she couldn't be normal. The girl just silently endured it. I couldn't let this continue. I'm allowed to remove a child from such situations if I believe it's harmful to them, so I did. I also contacted Child Protective Services, CPS. It turned out that the harm toward her sister was actually the mother harming both girls and then blaming it on the older one. I'm happy to report that she was moved to live with her grandparents in another state, where she's now thriving and happy. Yikes, imagine the audacity of those parents coming in and raining down their negativity on this poor girl, thinking they're going to get away with it. Little did they know they were up against the psychiatric hospital's own little superhero, the eagle-eyed, kid-whispering CPS calling defender of the innocent. Talk about a plot twist, and a good one at that. Story 2. During my student teaching, there was a girl in one of my classes who consistently avoided doing work. She turned in homework late and ignored major projects until the last minute, often asking for extra help during lunch or after school to catch up. One day, I caught her cheating on a quiz. She had written down the answers and hidden them in the plastic cover of her binder, which she placed by her feet. I confiscated the quiz and gave her a 0, explaining that cheating was not allowed. A week later, during parent-teacher conferences, the girl and her mother met with me. The mother challenged every graded assignment I had returned, arguing over individual points. She claimed that since her daughter had spelled everything correctly, she deserved some credit, or that circling the right answer should still earn points even if it was later crossed out in favor of a different answer. And this debate lasted almost an hour. Finally, the mother brought up the quiz incident. When I explained the cheating, the mom actually suggested that her daughter should receive credit for being clever enough to come up with that cheating method. After that experience, I made sure to have meetings with myself, my mentor teacher, and the principal present to ensure a more supportive and appropriate environment for discussing student progress and behavior. Story 3. Growing up, I was that kid who faced tough times at home. My father worked shifts and spent his time fixing cars in the backyard to help support our family. Not because he didn't earn enough, but because my mother struggled with a playing habit. Instead of tackling the habit, he focused on managing the consequences instead. I would leave for school from a cold house with my mother still in bed, no breakfast, and without a coat in freezing weather. This was because any money that could have been used for essentials was spent on her habit. For years, I went without medical care, toothpaste, hair conditioner, haircuts, and wore old shoes and socks with holes. During PE, I'd be in the chilly school gym with bare feet and just a t-shirt, as money for gym shoes and sweatshirts was diverted to her habit. One day, the vice principal called me to her office. It wasn't to scold me, but to give me the optional parts of the school uniform that I was missing, like a coat and a school blazer. These were the extras that made the difference between being comfortable and freezing on the long walk or bike ride to school. She didn't make a fuss, she simply met a need. Her kindness ignited a spark in me that has lasted almost 40 years. Today, I'm the parent who volunteers at school, quietly provides what teachers need, and dedicates time, money, and effort to helping others and doing charity work. It's not for recognition or for thanks. In fact, I'm embarrassed by such attention. I do it because nearly 40 years ago, someone showed they cared to me. Story 4. As a student in kindergarten, there was a kid in our class who was quite unusual and had a distinctive smell. But I found him interesting, so we would play together during recess. I had a birthday party once, and it was meant to be a short event lasting a few hours. All the other kids went home early, but it was getting very late, and his parents still hadn't arrived to pick him up. I was tired and ready for bed, so my parents made a sleeping area for us in the living room, and we ended up having a sleepover. At 2 a.m., his parents finally showed up after multiple unanswered calls. I immediately understood the situation. Even as a young child, I recognized that these parents fit the stereotype of what some might call white trash. They smelled strongly of drinks, which I was familiar with due to drinking habits in my family. They also made up a story about getting new tires for their car, the speedometer showing the wrong speed, and getting pulled over, among other excuses that just didn't seem true. It all made sense to me now why he acted odd and smelled distinctly. At the beginning of first grade, he never appeared, and then he showed up for a few days about a month into the school year. Randomly in third grade, he was back for a few weeks, but I never saw him again after that. I searched for him on Facebook recently, and it seems he's following in his parents' footsteps, embodying many negative stereotypes. I talked to my parents about this kid, and they explained that the reason he wasn't in school with us for a few years was that he was taken away by Child Protective Services, which my mom had contacted. He returned to school a couple of times because his parents regained custody, but he was taken away again, which is why he left us for good. I feel sorry for the kid because he was really nice at first, but as time went on and I saw him again, he became more aggressive and disrespectful. It's sad to see how his parents' behavior likely influenced him in such a negative way. Story 5. In my 7th grade class, there was a girl who was very intelligent but rarely turned in her homework, managing to pass mainly on the strength of her test scores. Once I praised her for helping a classmate who was struggling with an assignment, only to discover later that she hadn't completed her own work. I reached out to her parents and it became clear they were the type who always had an excuse, quickly shifting the responsibility onto me as if I should personally oversee their daughter's homework. I turned to the girl to hear her perspective as she had been silent throughout the conversation. Her parents started to speak for her again, but I raised my index finger and said, "No, you've had your turn. I want to hear her thoughts on this." She seemed to appreciate being heard, and she spoke for about 30 minutes about her views on education. At the end of our discussion, I kept her parents from interrupting and told her that if she was going to talk so passionately about education, she needed to support her words with actions and complete her assignments without interference from her parents or me. And from that point on, she never missed another assignment for the rest of the year. It was a moment that made me proud to be a teacher. Imagine the parents' shock when they realized their daughter wasn't just a silent sidekick in the conversation. It's like they brought a mute button for her, but the teacher had the remote, and with one click, she was unleashed a 30-minute monologue on education that left everyone speechless. The parents were probably thinking, "We're here to talk about homework, not to get schooled ourselves." Story 6. These children, 3 of them in total, were known for being challenging at the after-school care where I worked. I had often heard negative things about their father, but it wasn't until I experienced his behavior firsthand that I understood the connection between his parenting and his children's conduct. The eldest, in 5th grade, would ignore our instructions, provoke other children. When we asked him to stop, he would respond with disrespect. The middle child in 3rd grade had trouble focusing for more than 5 minutes and would often pester other kids by causing trouble and spreading rumors. The youngest, in kindergarten and 6 years old, was not still fully toilet trained and had to repeat the year due to being below normal developmental and social levels. One afternoon, the eldest was in a good mood and shared with pride that his dad was picking him up early at 4 p.m. to go see a movie. This was great news as the 3 kids were usually the last to be picked up. However, 4 p.m. came and went with no sign of their dad. The time passed, 4:30, 5, 6, 6:30 p.m., and it was closing time. We received a call from their dad apologizing for being delayed. It was almost 7 p.m. when their dad finally arrived. As the kids gathered their belongings, he attempted to explain himself to me, but his explanations were scattered. "Don't tell the kids, but I'm really out of it right now. I stayed back with some friends and had a few drinks. Investment banking is stressful, so you look forward to Fridays." "So, you're about 20 now? What's a young, pretty person like you doing working so late on a Friday night?" He offered to give me and my coworker extra money for the additional time we stayed. The final blow came when the eldest asked his dad about the movie they were supposed to see. His dad simply replied, "Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot." At that moment, I realized that these children were constantly being told, "You don't really matter that much to me." About 2 months after this incident, the children left the school with just a week's notice. Despite regularly expressing their dislike for us, I had never seen them as quiet as they were during that last week. We haven't seen them since. Okay, so if you're enjoying the video and can probably relate to at least one of the stories, then please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 7. During my time as an elementary teacher's aide in college, I witnessed a challenging situation during a parent teacher conference with a fifth grader who was struggling and his parents. The student was intelligent but somehow disengaged, reading at barely a first grade level. The teacher outlined the individualized efforts we had been making over the past few months to enhance his reading skills and foster a love for learning. The teacher delicately suggested that the student should practice reading at home with an adult. I proposed that since the student was enthusiastic about Pokemon, he might enjoy the novelizations of Pokemon stories available at the local bookstore, which could help spark his interest and improve his reading comprehension. The father gave me a disdainful look that I'll never forget. "We don't have extra money to spend on something he can do at school," he said. Being a teenager and not confident in confrontational situations, I averted my gaze and remained silent. The teacher assured the parents that we were doing our utmost to assist their child and would continue to support their son in improving his reading skills. And that was the end of the discussion. A few days later, the students were sharing something positive that had happened to them that week, a practice the teacher had initiated, which the kids adored. When it was the struggling student's turn, he stood up, pulled an empty video game case and controller from his bag, and announced, "This week, my dad bought a new PlayStation and lots of new games, and we've been staying up late every night playing." I felt a wave of frustration and sympathy. His parents sat there and told us they couldn't afford to help their child improve and enjoy learning with something as simple and inexpensive as a book about Pokemon. Yet they had no problem spending hundreds of dollars on a new PlayStation and games. It would have been so beneficial if they had considered purchasing a book about video games for their child. The situation was just incredibly disheartening. Story 8. During my time as a daycare teacher while attending college, I encountered a particularly challenging child named Andrew. He was a toddler, but his behavior was far beyond the typical terrible twos. It was as if his tantrums and misbehavior were amplified tenfold. When there was a conflict, Andrew was often at the center of it. He would scream during quiet time, seemingly just to create chaos. He rarely listened to instructions, kept his hands to himself, or showed any understanding of basic manners. Every teacher in the daycare, including myself, found him incredibly trying at times. Andrew was so well known for his behavior that even the elementary school staff knew him by name. I eventually met Andrew's mom, who appeared to be married, but I never saw or met Andrew's dad. It seemed like he wasn't involved in his son's life at all. Andrew's mom was visibly anxious and treated Andrew as if he were a fragile doll with a life-threatening condition rather than a real person with his own feelings and the need to learn self-reliance. She insisted on doing everything for him as if he were completely helpless. Realizing that Andrew wasn't receiving much guidance or positive attention at home, I decided to start praising him whenever possible. I waited for the right opportunity, which took a few days given Andrew's usually unruly behavior. Then, one unforgettable Tuesday, the children were sitting at the lunch table waiting to wash their hands before eating. I needed to choose the first child, and Andrew happened to be sitting quietly with his hands folded, while the others were restless. It was a rare and precious moment. "Andrew," I said. "Andrew's sitting so nicely, I think he gets to wash his hands first today." Andrew looked worried when I called his name, probably thinking he was in trouble again. But then he understood what was happening. He got up and walked towards me with a bewildered expression, as if he'd just been unexpectedly called on stage to receive an award. The other children immediately quieted down, hoping to be chosen next. In that instant, Andrew became the star of the 2-year-old classroom. The other children even began to include him in their games. And this set off a positive feedback loop. Andrew's behavior improved, earning him more praise, which in turn encouraged him to behave even better. I would reward Andrew by letting him hold the storybook during story time or help me with other tasks. Before long, he became like my personal assistant, always ready to help. He seemed to love being of assistance. It was remarkable to see the transformation. Overnight, he became a well-mannered child, reminiscent of Clark Kent. I believe Andrew finally developed a sense of pride, something his anxious mom had never allowed him to experience. He wanted to wash his own hands, try using the toilet by himself, and open doors. A few weeks later, I saw his mom at the school. She was trying to tie Andrew's shoes, but he insisted, "No, I can do it." And he did. The look on her face was priceless. It was as if she had finally realized he was a capable individual. I had to leave that job to continue my studies a few months later. Telling Andrew I was leaving was the hardest goodbye of all, as I had grown to like him the most. He even started calling me mommy, and although he stopped after I corrected him, it was clear he still saw me in that nurturing role. His questions about why I was leaving and his confusion were heart wrenching. I visited the school a year later to say hello to my former colleagues and happened to see some of my old students. They all had grown so much in just a year, but I recognized them instantly. The children noticed me but quickly lost interest. I was just another adult to them, except for Andrew. He didn't say anything, but his eyes never left me. I often wonder where he is now. Story 9. The first time I met the parents was during a meeting in the admin office, as they hadn't attended the meet and greet or open house. Their child was struggling in all subjects and the parents were difficult to reach. The child was exhibiting bad behavior towards other students, demanding constant attention from me, and the parents denied any wrongdoing, insisting that their child didn't act that way at home and that they had enrolled him in judo lessons to manage his energy. Despite my efforts to keep him from bothering other students, he continued to be a disruption in my class, causing one student to ask their parents to transfer them out of the school after enduring his relentless pestering for just 4 days. He would call the students names like stupid and dumb and make comments about their smell, finding ways to pester them during lineups, special classes, and recess. Following a playground incident where he used a judo hold on another student, we had a meeting that included his parents, his therapist, the principal, and the vice principal. He was given a suspension and would be monitored upon his return to school. Despite the evidence, the parents continued to deny any issues. Then they shifted the blame, claiming that we weren't doing enough for him, that our school didn't have enough services, and that we didn't like him. I had a day off the week after the meeting. Upon my return, I learned that he had been removed from the school. The child did have moments of happiness and could be engaged when he chose to be. However, it was clear that his parents would continue to enable his bad and hurtful behavior towards others. Story 10. I had a student who was generally a good kid, though he seemed a bit disconnected at times. He had some goals that I would have liked him to see achieved, but I noticed he could be quite demanding. He would insist on things being done a certain way and would over-explain why it had to be that way, which I found unusual. During the parent-teacher conference, his parents arrived and took their seats. His dad seemed distant and silent, while his mom didn't hesitate to launch into a ton of complaints. She criticized every C grade her son had received, insisted that his individualized education program, IEP, entitled him to extra time for assignments and retakes, and declared her son's destiny for a prestigious college, warning me not to interfere with his future. And the complaints went on and on and on. The meeting concluded with the boy reminding me in front of his mom that he would need extra time for an upcoming test. It was incredibly frustrating, but I refrained from expressing my exasperation. Instead, I silently wished for some divine intervention to deal with the situation. It wasn't surprising that the boy acted so entitled and had unrealistic expectations. His mom had spent time convincing him that his way of doing things was the key to success, and she was willing to pressure anyone to ensure it happened. Yikes, I'm pretty sure this parent-teacher conference was sponsored by the Overbearing Mothers of America Club. You know, the one where they hand out awards for the most creative ways to make a teacher's eye twitch left and right, left and right. I bet the guy's dad got a secret stash of world's best dad mugs just to remind himself that he's not actually, invisible. And, well, for the kid, he's probably got a future career in politics with those negotiation skills or professional whining, the toss-up, heads or tails. Story 11. Last year, I had a student who challenged all expectations, though in the area where I work, he wasn't entirely unique. He arrived at school weeks into the year, a teenager repeating 7th grade. My students weren't always well behaved, but this student's behavior was on a different level. He would say words and throw papers or tests on the floor when given to him. During lectures, he would scream in a mix of English and Spanish, rap, or yell the entire class period to disrupt the lesson. He directed offensive language at me, other students, administrators, and even respected teachers, using bad terms to describe everyone. His behavior was intolerable. He disrupted the classroom, pestered his peers, and didn't respond to any interventions. Eventually, we discussed with his mom the possibility of sending him to a school better equipped to support his needs. It was then that I felt a deep sympathy for him. Despite his menacing behavior, the picture of his home life became clear when his mom arrived, heavily pregnant, wearing worn out clothes, and carrying a strong odor. Her conversation quickly became incomprehensible, mixing Spanish with words and bad names, even calling her son names in front of the teachers, which brought him to tears. He is one of 11 children. His father lives in Pennsylvania with another family, and his mom's only income is child welfare assistance. Once he had a bad tooth for months, and we had to call Child Protective Services before he received dental care. His favorite time of year is January when his mom gets her tax return and he can buy new shoes. Despite his tough exterior, he loves school because it's the only place he receives love and attention. Story 12. I work as a paraeducator at a school for children with autism, assisting in the classroom with all the students, but primarily focusing on a high-functioning girl named Sarah. Sarah had a tendency to lie and was quite manipulative. If one staff member told her she couldn't do or have something, she would ask others in hopes of getting the response she wanted. Sarah disliked schoolwork and would do anything to avoid it. However, Sarah had a weakness for candy. If she maintained a good attitude, participated, and completed a reasonable amount of work, she could earn candy each class period. One day, Sarah told me she was sick and couldn't do her work. I explained that if she was truly sick, I couldn't give her candy as it would make her feel worse. She agreed and ended up having a good day, earning candy if not for her lie about being sick. She was picked up early, and just before her mom arrived, Sarah said she felt better and asked for her candy. I explained that her sickness wouldn't be cured after just a few hours, so she couldn't have it yet. This led to a meltdown. Sarah screamed about how unfair I was and expressed her hatred towards me. She attempted to hurt me as her mom entered the room. Her mom hugged her and asked what had happened. Sarah claimed I was being unfair by not giving her the candy she had earned. I explained the situation to her mom, mentioning Sarah's lie about being sick. The mom asked Sarah if she had lied to avoid work, and Sarah admitted it. Surprisingly, the mom then told me that since Sarah had admitted to the lie, she deserved the candy and I should give it to her. This situation frustrated me greatly. The mom had just taught her daughter that lying could still lead to rewards, which was a concerning lesson. And well, if you like these stories or were touched by one of them, I think it was story 9 about Andrew that got to me. Here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.